What's up, people? This is your boy TL. This is your Week 12 fantasy preview. This week I have 5 quarterbacks, 10 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 5 tight ends, and 4 defenses that I recommend. We'll start with the defenses. The 4 defenses I like this week are New Orleans, Baltimore, Houston, and Oakland for pickups if you need to fill in. Moving on to quarterbacks. The 5 quarterbacks I like is RG3, Glennon from Tampa Bay, Carson Palmer, McGloin from the Raiders, and Alex Smith. The reason for those, RG3 is starting to come on. He's still not playing the way he did last year, but he is putting up pretty consistent fantasy stats. So that I've been pleased with that. I have him in a lot of leagues. Glennon, I think he had 2 touchdowns, no picks last week. He's played pretty solid since being a starter. Carson Palmer, I'm not a believer in Carson Palmer, so be warned of that. He had a good week this week. I think he had, I want to say 2 touchdowns, no picks, and a high completion percentage. But moving forward, I wouldn't really trust him that much. McGloin from the Raiders. McGloin, he had 3 touchdowns, no picks. And they were saying he was going to beat out Terrell Pryor, but something happened right before the season started, which gave Pryor the opportunity. McGloin, so far so good. I mean, he started, had a great game, and they beat the Texans. The Texans can't buy a win right now. And last but not least, Alex Smith. Alex Smith quietly put together a very nice game for the Chiefs against the Broncos. His receivers dropped a lot of passes, so that hurt their chances of winning the game. But he had 2 touchdowns, no picks, and he also had some rushing yards. Moving on to running backs, this is my biggest group of players. There's 10 running backs. Some of these guys obviously not as appetizing as others. The 10 running backs are, in no particular order, Donald Brown, Ogbeana from the Browns, Bernard from Cincinnati, Ivory from the Jets, Rainey from Tampa Bay, Jennings from the Raiders, Ryan Matthews from San Diego, Daniel Thomas from Miami, Monte Ball from the Broncos, and last but not least, Shane Vereen from New England. Donald Brown has been week in and week out outproducing Trent Richardson. There was nothing new this week. He had a pretty big game fantasy-wise. He scored twice. So he has pretty good value. Ogbeana, he's slowly been getting more touches from the Browns. So look for that to continue going forward. Bernard quietly had a pretty good, solid game rushing and receiving for Cincinnati. Ivory had about 100 yards and a touchdown for the Jets. Rainey had a huge game for Tampa Bay. I'm starting to think Tampa Bay, maybe their system for running backs is good because every guy they plugged in there has had good stats. Rainey had 3 touchdowns this week, so he's a huge pickup in fantasy. Jennings from the Raiders, he had about, I think, 150 and a touchdown. He's pretty much making McFadden look expendable, which is very surprising. I didn't know Jennings could do that, but he has. Ryan Matthews had a solid game for San Diego. Daniel Thomas had a good game. He had, I think, about 60 yards and a touchdown. But in Miami, I don't trust the running game. It seems like you don't know who's going to rush, and it's unpredictable, so it's kind of hard to trust. Monte Ball had 2 touchdowns for the Broncos. Peyton Manning himself has said that they're going to rush the ball more towards the end of the season, so I look for Knowshon Moreno and Monte Ball to get those touches. And last but not least, Shane Vereen. Shane Vereen finally came back from that injury. He led the Patriots in targets from Tom Brady, which is very impressive. So that goes to show you how much Brady trusts his hands. So especially in a PPR league, he's money. I have 5 wide receivers this week: Santonio Holmes, Harry Douglas, Floyd from Arizona, Streeter from the Raiders, and Jarius Wright from the Vikings. Santonio Holmes is finally back. He had a lot of he led his team in receiving, had a decent amount of targets. Harry Douglas is pretty much a silver lining for Atlanta. He continues to put up big stats every week. Floyd from Arizona, he's kind of hit or miss, with him and Andre Roberts, but he had a huge game this week. Rod Streeter continues to be pretty much the Raiders' #1 receiving threat. What sucks is his production is kind of off and on. When he's on, it's 60+ and usually a touchdown. When he's off, obviously it sucks. And last but not least, Jarius Wright managed to get in the end zone twice this week for the Vikings. So will that continue in the future? Not so sure. But if you're desperate, obviously he's worth a look. Tight ends, last but not least, there's 5 tight ends that I like. Kobe Fleener for the Colts continues to put up good stats. I think he will the rest of the year with Reggie Wayne out. Delaney Walker impressed me. he had, I think, about 90 yards and a touchdown. But he has good hands. He produces for them, so I think they'll continue to throw to him. Hausler from the Arizona Cardinals, he had a lot of targets. Carson basically looked for Hausler, obviously Fitzgerald, and Floyd. So that was pretty much the three guys he looked at. So if he trusts him that much, he's probably going to throw from the ball more. Graham from Texans also, he had a lot of targets as well, and so I look for that to continue. And last but not least, Clay from Miami. Now, the reason Clay is an interesting pickup is because he has had decent stats all year, but this game in particular, he had a really nice highlight where he caught an out pattern, ran a guy over, and then rumbled for another 40 yards and a touchdown. So going forward, I think that play was impressive. I think that his quarterback trusts him, and so I think he's going to get looks the rest of the season. But that's about it, guys. That's Week 12. In fantasy this week, I think I went 5-4 or 4-5. Kind of a rough week for me, but I'm in the playoff picture 7 out of 9 leagues, so I'm just working on those other 2. I wish you guys the best luck in Week 12. I'll talk to you next week. Peace.